This is a story of longing. A longing that sees a rich named Zacchaeus climb a tree like a child, tearing his fine robes, bark burning his thighs, twigs tangled in his hair, just to get a glimpse of this Jesus as he passes through town. Blood pumping, adrenaline coursing. There's a raw animal part of him that needs to climb that sycamore higher and higher to get a better, bigger vision, because he knows that what he has been doing with his life so far is far too small. Zacchaeus, Luke's gospel tells us, was a tax collector, and not just a tax collector, but the chief tax collector. Part of the imperial administration representing the power of Rome in the region. And because of that place of privilege, and perhaps because of his abuse of that place of privilege, Zacchaeus has become very rich. Luke also discloses that Zacchaeus is small in stature, and perhaps this has been a pain point for him, perhaps to compensate, to make himself feel big. His days have been dedicated to growing his bank account rather than his relationships with his neighbors or building the common good. But remember, this is the story of longing. And there is something within this small man with a smallness of spirit that longs for something bigger, something more. And there is something about that moment where Jesus passes through Jericho, where Zacchaeus must make a move, and where his longing mystically meets a longing of others, the longing of the woman hemorrhaging for 12 years. If I but touch the hem of his robe, it meets the longing of blind Bartimaeus. If I might just hear a word of his mercy, it meets our longings every time we feel small or powerless. And so, blood pumping, adrenaline coursing, he and we climb that tree like a child. If I might just see his face, things might be different. I might be different. And that is exactly what happens, we are told. Come down, Zacchaeus, Jesus says, that I might stay with you, for I have come for you. The Son of Man has come to seek out and save the lost. Scripture tells us that this was an encounter that changed a life and the life of a community. Look, half my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor, Zacchaeus says. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. From individualism to community care, from self-interest to self-sacrifice, from smallness to expansiveness. If we want this shift in our lives, in the world, it starts with acknowledging our longing for something bigger, something more. It starts with our longing for God. Over a year ago now, I received an email from our minister emeritus, Malcolm Sinclair, with the subject line, all in caps, "Not to intrude," which got my attention. He wanted to let me know that this anniversary service would be the 75th anniversary of the death of the very Reverend Dr. Peter Bryce, who was a transformational leader of this church from the late 1930s to his death in 1950. And I know was also someone that Malcolm was deeply inspired by, and not just because he was very Scottish. Dr. Bryce came to Met after serving a term as the moderator, the spiritual leader of the United Church of Canada, where during his term, the church removed barriers based on gender, and Lydia Grucci became the first woman ordained to ministry in the United Church of Canada. Dr. Bryce was an active agent in social reform and lobbied for the passing of the Workers' Compensation Act. He was particularly well known for his work with low-income families, but he was also well known and well liked among Toronto's moneyed elite. There's a great story where he approached the owner of the Toronto Daily Star and suggested the newspaper sponsor a fundraising drive to provide Christmas presents to children of families in need, which became the still active Star Santa Claus Fund that over the years has raised millions of dollars. Dr. Bryce was deeply invested in the plight of the poor, and under his leadership, over 5,000 people a week access supportive programs here at Metropolitan. He was a leader in the temperance movement, speaking often about the destructiveness of addiction. And during his tenure here, our church hosted the first organized AA meeting in all of Canada. Of his spiritual life, he was known to love the 23rd Psalm, which Jan read so beautifully early for us today, and specifically the psalmist's use of the word through. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. After his own death in 1950, his obituary said this: how he loved to stress the word through. God leads people through valleys, he insisted, to the smiling meadows of the hereafter. He knew that death is but a gate leading to untold blessings. God leads people through every valley that feels like death. Dr. Bryce knew that our deepest longings coming from needing to know that we are not alone, that God is with us in our struggles, through our pain, even unto death and the untold blessings that lay beyond the veil of our mortality. I think about Peter Bryce often. Every time I walk down the aisle of our sanctuary, I look up at that window that was dedicated to his ministry here. In many ways, we are a very different church now, much smaller now, less money, less people, less influence in the public sphere. In my research for this service, I found the bulletin from November 5th, 1950, our 132nd anniversary service, and Dr. Bryce's last service before he died. And in that bulletin it says, we are gratified to have with us the Honorable Leslie Frost, Prime Minister of Ontario, to bring greetings at our morning service. Back then, we had a politician open our worship. Today, we had a poet. There has been a disentangling over the decades between secular and spiritual power that I believe is actually a healthy thing for the church. But even though much has changed from Dr. Bryce's time, what has not changed is human longing and the deep need to be connected to something larger, greater, more powerful than ourselves. What has also not changed for our church are the complexities of being stewards of a full city block in the core of Canada's largest city. In Dr. Bryce's days, the issue was alcohol in the park and how that was affecting individuals and families. Today, it is fentanyl, or whatever poisonous variation, therefore, is currently being peddled for profit out there. Many of you who worship online or come to church on Sundays only after we have mostly cleaned up out there might not know the realities of ministry here at the corner of Church and Queen. And so I'm going to share a story with you, and it is a hard story. You see, a couple weeks ago, after our Sunday service, after we had all gone home, but sometime before our staff came back on Monday morning, someone died out on the steps of our church. By the time I got here, the ambulance had already left, and the police were taking down their police tape after concluding that the death was caused by an overdose. And even without talking to anyone, I could see exactly what had happened. It had been cold and rainy that night, and the soaking wet orange emergency blankets that people had been huddled under had been pushed to the side of the steps. There was various drug paraphernalia, needles, arm straps, broken glass pipes. There were 2 open naloxone kits, evidence that someone had tried to revive the person. And then there was all the medical waste, the gloves, open wrappers, and an oxygen mask discarded on the steps after the life-saving efforts had been called off. I spent a lot of time in the park the next day, just talking to people, trying to piece together what had happened, who this person was, why he was out on our steps that night. I didn't learn much outside that he was a young man and that his friend had indeed tried to revive him before the ambulance had arrived. I spoke to a different man that day who told me about his own life on the streets. None of us want to be out here, he said, and we know the drugs might kill us, but we take them because they take away the pain. They take away the pain, if even for a few minutes. And then he said something that will stay with me for the rest of my life. He said, "I don't know why people end up on the steps of your church. Perhaps we are looking for God. Perhaps people climb the steps of our church because they are looking for God." I don't know what we could have done to prevent the death out there. I often feel very small, very powerless in the face of addiction and the crippling poverty we see out there. But I do know that the man who died on our steps was someone's son, someone's friend. He was a beloved child of the living God, just like you, just like me. The tragic end to the story of his life is a reminder of the awesome responsibility that comes with being the church of Jesus Christ. What we do here is not a show. The gospel is not some abstract notion to tickle the intellect and then set down on a shelf. This is real. This is life. And yes, sometimes it is death. This is the story of longing. Whether it is climbing the steps of a church or the branches of a sycamore, there is something within each of us that longs to know that we are not alone, that things might be different. We might be different. If we might just see his face or hear his voice or simply touch the hem of his robe. For those of you involved in 12-step programs like AA, you know very well that the first 2 steps are about admitting our powerlessness, our smallness, and then believing, having faith in a greater power, having faith that there is a loving hand to guide us through our times of pain, through our moments of grief, through our loss of capacity or lack of direction, through every valley that feels like death, there is a loving hand to guide us. This is the awesome responsibility that comes with being the church of Jesus Christ, because sometimes, as his body in the world, his hands and heart in the world, we do this for each other. As Patty told us in our opening poem today, the people had come and had brought God with them. And they would come and they would go, and the light they followed would somehow follow them. I don't know what we could have done to prevent the death of the man out on the steps a couple weeks ago. The problems are bigger than us and will take solutions greater than we can implement on our own. But we can proclaim that the one we lost was a beloved child of God. And so as a church, we can honor him in ceremony, we can pray for him in community, with the faith that the Son of Man comes to seek out and save all those who are lost. Friends, this is the light of Christ. And on behalf of this community, I'm going to go place this light out on the steps of our church. And as I do this, I invite you to bow your heads in prayer. Pray for the one who died out on the steps. Pray that his pain now may be over and that he rests in the loving arms of our Creator. Pray for all those who face addiction in their lives. Pray for their families. Pray for our community. Pray for yourselves and all the times that you feel lost or small or powerless. Turn your hearts towards the greater power, the one who holds us through every valley, even the valley that feels like death. This is the great exchange of life for light. This is the story of longing. Blessed are they whose longing touches the Lord. Blessed the light they bring. Amen.